Welcome to this week's episode of our Franchise Accelerator podcast. The goal of this podcast is to get you thinking big, right? Your business is your most valuable asset, but how do we turn your asset into an investment? So whether franchising is 5 years away, 10 years away, our belief is you need to build the processes now so you are ready to scale. And part of that scaling is really looking at the 5 elements of franchising. Because even though, again, franchising might be 5 years away, we need these core elements for our business to be ready to go and really moving into a path of growth. So the first one that we have is brand awareness. So what do we mean by brand awareness? What we mean by that is really looking at how much does your customer know about your brand. So if we're thinking about, the burger place on the corner, when your customer comes in, are they coming in because it's local? Are they coming in because it's convenient? Or is there something about the products you're serving that gets them to come back? Is there something unique that you're doing? And so we're joined today with Chris because he comes from a great world of franchises. So what have you seen about brand awareness?
Well, a lot of it, is through social media today, right? That's the big one. Catchy phrases, colorful ads. It's anything that's eye-catchy, things that you hear and you kind of repeat to yourself. That's the way they're going with it. And, a lot of these are rewards, right? That's another way to make yourself brand awareness. So it's just, anything you could do social media-wise. It's email blast. It's, the reels now. The reels are everywhere. Every franchise has got a reel out. So
yeah.
You can get yourself on social media constantly. If you could look all day, you'll be on there. If you have someone working on it.
Yes. And I think the other element of brand awareness that we sometimes forget is you don't have to be all things to all people, right? I think a place to start, if you've never really thought about your brand, is what does your customer think about your brand? What are the common elements that your customer has? Is it a certain demographic? Is it a certain age range? Is it a certain, is it convenience that they're all coming from work or they're all going to the baseball game? Really thinking about that, because ultimately we want to go more into that bucket or whatever we find, rather than trying to say, well, I want to be for the business crowd and the baseball crowd, right? Probably can't be both. So I really want to do the best I can with that core element of people. And I think the brand that you came from most recently, did a good job of that, right? Like
Sure.
On the go.
Yeah, they definitely targeted a specific group of the age there, and it worked.
Yeah.
Before they went younger, it wasn't older. That's what they advertised to.
Yeah.
It was definitely for the older crowd, right?
Yeah.
Coffee, donuts. Then sandwiches, refreshers, and cappuccinos and lattes, ice drinks. All of a sudden, that switched quickly.
Yeah.
But that's good marketing.
Right.
That's somebody that knew what they were doing. They spoke about it. They thought about it, and they made it happen. And that you do the same thing in your business. You just have to tune into what it is you do best.
Exactly. And not be afraid to just hone in on that one thing that brings them back. And, we can find other things later, but I think this is a great place to start. The second one we have, which I think is so important, is the idea of repeatable concept. So many times, when I'm talking to our clients, some of our clients, you hear about the fact that it's, oh, I have to be there on a Friday night. I have to be there on a Saturday night. My customers are going to be mad if I'm not there. They just hate not to see me. And I think if we're thinking about growth, like again, it may not be franchising next week, but any sort of growth, we really want to remove it being all about you and more about the product they're serving. And I like to use the example of Wendy's, right? You go to Wendy's, you don't expect to see Dave, right? Like you're okay that Dave's not there.
Right.
And if we're going to get there, right, if your goal is more of a passive involvement in your company long term, we have to find a way to make sure there is no difference between whether you are there or not. And I think that comes down to that repeatable concept idea, which the franchises do so well. What are some of the things that you've seen they do that make it more repeatable than, say, the independent?
Well, it's training, it's consistency of the product, and it's a lot of teamwork. It can't just be Laura's coffee shop, right? It has to be that it's everybody there working hard. Everyone's pulling their weight. But really consistency and training is really what's going to build that out. That you don't have to be at the forefront all the time, being the face of the business, right? It could be almost anyone in your restaurant.
Yeah. And I would say an example of that, I was traveling recently with my son, and it was like late at night. We were kind of on this highway. There was, a subway, and we walked in, and, it must have been like 10 minutes before they closed. And the subs they made us were like beautiful, right? You could have taken a picture of how perfect they were, and just think like, that's repeatable concept, right? Like that's pretty impressive.
Right.
Because you could have cut some corners with us. We probably wouldn't have said anything. You were the only.
But it's not their way.
Right.
It's not their way. Right.
And you think about that compared to an independent, and I think sometimes that's where we fall short, is we don't prove to our customers that they're going to get the same thing, the same service, the same product every time they come in the door.
Right. And that comes back to training and your management skills.
Yeah.
Right. That other shop you went to, I mean, they did exactly what I said. Right. They were consistent product, and they were trained to do it correctly. You don't really need much more than that. If you can train people to do it correctly and serve a consistent product that's good, you'll get there.
Yeah. And our goal of this whole, movement, this whole podcast, is really to say it doesn't have to be done overnight, right? Like if you find that it's not repeatable, right? The burger you got on Tuesday doesn't taste like the burger you got on Saturday. That's okay, right? That starts with awareness. And I think, the chains are kind of a good way to kind of be curious about, what do they do at some of these chains that I'm not doing, and how can I do little tweaks, to get me there?
Right. Well, I think the most important thing people have to remember, we assume right away that everybody that's working for us knows what we know.
Yeah.
Right? And then at some point you realize, usually when it's too late, it was, no, they didn't.
They don't know.
Right. So I learned a long time ago, always go back in my mind, restaurant 101 with this person. Like, I'm going to find out what they know. Yeah. I'm not going to assume they know that they have to put salt and pepper on the burger. I'm going to ask them if they know they have to. Yeah. Or, anything to that way. But I think that's what's important, is that we know, we need to find out what their skill level is, and that's going to help us grow.
Yeah, and I really think that that's something that's really become a challenge in the last 3 years with all the turnover, right? If you look at your pool of labor in 19, you probably had people that had been there 8 years, 10 years, who could kind of pass on this knowledge. And now, chances are that person is gone, which I think brings you to the idea, like you said, of training, right? And I was having a conversation with one of our clients earlier today, and we talked about checklists, right? As much as you hate to keep dwelling on the importance of checklists, there is an incredible gap in the labor pool right now in hospitality, right? You have people who just don't know. Right. They try to know. I mean, she had this example of they double ordered, this filet product. I mean, crazy dollars, right? Because they truly didn't know the size of what they were ordering. Right. It wasn't like they were trying to do a bad job, but, I think sometimes having those checklists in place can just make sure mistakes don't happen.
Right, and we're all, advocates of the checklist. We love it. We know it's going to make you better. And, it goes back to sometimes they don't have to know. Yeah. But if we have this checklist, it's going to walk them through whatever we're doing. Right. Or whatever we're asking them to do, it could walk them through it. So, that's one of the most important things that you have in your restaurant, or checklist. And, it's up to you to make sure that they're done.
Yeah, and especially if you have these big dreams, which is great to have, right? I love talking to someone who says, you know what, I want one of these on every corner. Like, that to me is really exciting. But unfortunately, we're not going to get there without some of these basic things put into our existing locations, not waiting until we have 10 to start then having a process, because it really will be too late.
If you can't run one location, you have no shot of running multiple locations. Right. So, you need to perfect that checklist in that one location before you can even think about moving on.
Yes. All right, so the next one is proven prototype. And really what we mean here is, especially for multi-units, right, chances are not all stores the same, right? Especially in the independent world, it's very rare that you would have even two stores that are similar. Usually there's different location, there's different town, there's different size, right? Not every store is the same square foot. But what we want to do is find the one that best represents what you're trying to do. Right? And it's not saying the other ones are bad, but it's like children, we don't have a favorite, but we have a favorite.
But we don't tell anyone.
We might, but really finding the one that if we were to say, I want to scale to 10, this is the one that I'm going to use as the example. And I think when we go deeper here, what we're really looking at is some of those intangibles, right? Because sometimes beyond the square footage and the town, there's a manager who fits better, right? There could be a staff that fits better. The hours could be better. There could be some of these intangible things that we're not realizing are really pushing our brand forward, and things that we could start to instill in the other ones.
Right.
What have you seen? I know Chris has managed many stores. What have you seen as some of the differences between the underperforming and the great stores?
It's not a secret. It's management.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it starts, management. You know, as a district manager, director of operations, a COO, it all trickles down, right? If you have a great manager in the location, I don't care who your DM is or who your director is. That GM is running the show, right? And it's the same thing. That GM could be terrible. It doesn't matter how good the DM is or the director is, because it all starts there. They're there every day.
Yeah.
Right? And the team is taking on their personality.
Yeah.
So if they have a poor personality, not a go-getter, he's got low morale, doesn't like the job, or maybe not qualified for the job, then that goes through the whole team.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all the difference you need.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, a lot of my work with our clients is on more of the forecasting side, kind of building out our entity schedules, our consolidated approaches. And to me, this is always the message that I try to get to them, across to them, is that you're comparing against the what if. So if you have a store that's underperforming sales-wise, the sales just aren't as good, you don't really know if there is a bad manager or there's things getting run, or, we've even seen cases where there's, things not getting rung in. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that underperforming store isn't as underperforming as we think if we made some of these changes.
Right. Yeah. It happens a lot. It's awareness. Yeah. Knowing what's going on, being involved, taking a look at what's happening, asking questions. You can't just let it go and just say, it's a bad store, it's a bad neighborhood.
Yes,
it's not working.
Exactly.
It's not your fault.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the GM's fault. It's just bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to eat over there. I don't know. No, it's more of a, let's take a look at this, take a deep dive into it, and I guarantee you we could find a way to make this work.
Yeah. And that's what the other thing is that I've seen with the difference between the franchise level or your corporate versus your independent, is that level of expectation, right? And I think this is something we've really tried to drive home to a lot of our multi-units, is like, if you have one that's $500,000 less than the other, if you were in a corporate location or a franchise, it's kind of unacceptable, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You can't be there. You have to have your eye on the ball all the time. Yeah. And when things like that start happening, they get noticed right away.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a month or two to play like that.
Yeah.
They're coming after you quick.
Yeah, and that's what I think we need to do, as we start to really think of ourselves as driving towards this idea of franchising or scaling our business, is really looking at all of our locations, looking at all of our revenue streams, and setting a higher level of expectation. Because I don't care what economy you're in, there's always market share to be had. And if you look at the population of your town, I love as an example, people who tell me that their sales are what they are, can't be better. Okay, look at the population of your town, and then look at the guests that came in last week. I guarantee it's like this.
It's way off. And you saw maybe 5% of your town.
Maybe.
Maybe 5% of your town.
Right. So even if you got to 6% of your town, how many more guests is that in seats, right? So it's not huge. And people are always going to want to go out to eat. People are always going to want to buy food products. So it really is the case where there is business to be had if you want it.
Absolutely. The only way you're not getting them is if you don't deserve them.
Yeah, I agree.
It's plain and simple.
Yeah. All right, so our next one is weekly accountability. We at the Larry Group love to talk about this a lot. But really the idea of weekly accountability is more than just an accounting term, right? I think the idea is, if you really look at the franchises, the restaurant groups, larger corporate companies, everybody is in a weekly model because it gives you that quick response, right? I can look at last week and I can instantly make a change. And the idea of waiting till the end of a period or the end of a month especially, it's just too long to wait. And, the other side of weekly accountability is it's something your team understands, right? In the restaurant business, if you go to any manager, they're going to know their weekly sales.
If you're getting a weekly report.
Right.
So I worked on both ends of it. I worked where we got a weekly report, and I worked where we got a monthly report, and I worked somewhere else where maybe you got a report. So the maybe you got a report didn't do so well. The monthly was really hard.
Yeah.
they make changes and be successful.
Yeah.
When it was the same company, when I asked, the franchisee, hey, we have to go to weekly, it's going to be better, it's going to be worth the money, blah, blah, blah. We did.
Yeah.
What a change.
Yeah.
And people got engaged.
Yeah.
They knew the numbers. They were excited. They knew how bonus structures work now. Now they had their eyes on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it changed it so much. It actually made it so much easier because we have the 52 opportunities instead of 12.
Right.
And we fix a little bit every week. Where if you wait to the end of that month, you're not fixing any of that because now you're into the next month. It's the hustle and the bustle.
Yeah.
Whatever was wrong is still going to be wrong. Plus now whatever wrong this month.
Yeah.
So that really doesn't work. Keeping yourself accountable the 1 week really works. I don't see any other way to do it.
I agree. And I think the other thing that we really try to instill, especially with our larger, restaurant group clients, franchise clients, is the idea that this accountability is a blend of the accounting side, right? How did each location perform? What was the bottom line? What's the percentage that they're bringing in? But also, how do they do on those checklists, on the oversight? Because we have seen time and time again a correlation between the team that's doing 90% of their checklist. They actually have a good P&L, they got a good food cost, they're doing okay. The team that's doing 40% of the checklist, labor's off by 10%, food cost, didn't do an inventory, right? Like
missing sales by a bunch.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a reason. And I think holding both in the same bucket and looking at both together, you can see some...
The both equal value.
Yeah.
You can't, let's say, I value this one more than the other. They're equal value. They're going to help you run your restaurant correctly and be aware of what's going on, which brings back to the whole accountability part of doing the work.
Yeah. Being
accountable to do the work.
And this is also, I think, what I love to ask, like you guys coming from the corporate world compared to the independent is, what would happen to a manager who said that they weren't going to do the checklist?
What happened? Would have a job.
Right. Exactly.
The job ends there.
Right.
Give me your keys and I'll see you later. There is no negotiation. We have things that we call our non-negotiables.
Right.
And that will be non-negotiable.
Right. And I think like our employees, as much as they may fight, they like structure, right? Like 9 times out of 10, they're going to get it done.
That's how I train my managers. Listen, they like structure.
Yeah.
People want structure. I don't want to work somewhere where there's no structure and it's chaos.
Right.
And people do what they want. They come to work when they want. They do the job they want. Oh, you're supposed to be over here at the barista station. Well, I don't want to do that today. I'm going to hand out donuts. No, wait, you're over. Right? I like structure, and I train my managers to hire people and only keep people that like structure as well.
Yeah.
If you have someone on your staff that doesn't like structure, they're not going to be a good employee.
Yeah.
Why keep them? And they're going to affect the other ones.
Yes.
So structure is great.
Yeah.
It makes a winning team.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to enforce the checklist.
You'll keep all your good employees if you have structure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. All right. Finally is ROI, or return on investment. And again, I think this is challenging you to look at what each element of your business, right, multiple locations, brings to the bottom line. Because as owners, right, we really need to stop looking at this as, I hope it works out, and really have that expectation that it will work out. And part of that starts with what is our return on investment. And we like to see on our weekly model 10% on the bottom line, right? Like it really has to show 10% on that bottom line at a minimum for the cash flow to work. Otherwise, you're going to be sweating payroll and all these other things. And that 10% includes all the money you're paying yourself and all those other things. Like, again, non-negotiable on the accounting side is 10%, because I've seen it happen where it doesn't work out, and it's always because we weren't driving 10%. Yeah. And I think that goes back to our repeatable concept and our prototype. It doesn't mean we have to raise sales, right, or raise prices. Right? We need to find a way to be creative, to make it work. I had a call earlier this week with one of our clients. They have a very heavy protein menu, right? They're in an area where they really can't raise prices. Their sales are great, but their margins are terrible. They're thinking about doing an event space, right? Very creative way to all of a sudden have something that has much better margin, doesn't affect their current client or their current customer. Is going to really make sure that they're able to get to 10% to the bottom line. And that's what we want to do, right? It isn't always just, okay, I'm going to sell more burgers and I'm going to charge more for the burger. Yeah. We really need to look at some of those other things.
Or other options. And, you have to, get out there and explore that. Because you can't always just raise the price. That can't be the answer, right? You're going to price yourself out.
Right.
So, yeah, getting out there, exploring some other options, and then just looking inside your business as well, trying to clean up what's in your business. Maybe, you could drop that food cost a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe you could drop that labor a little bit. Maybe you're running too much overtime on labor. Maybe hire a full-time person and do away with the overtime. There's just other ways to do it, and just to be creative and try to find a way to sink more money to that bottom line.
Yes, and not to promote Chris too much, but we also have our F Your Business podcast, which really digs deep on the food cost side, being creative with our menu, and driving our bottom line. But ultimately, it's great to have dreams, right? It's great to have the big dream, and we've seen it happen, right? We've seen the client go from 1 to 5 to 10. Yeah. I mean, it's exciting to be a part of that, but it all starts with your business generating profits. If it doesn't generate profits, it's never going to generate more profits if you get bigger. So it's not being selfish, but we have to have profits on our bottom line, and we have to really know it, right? As a business owner, you need to know that margin that you're bringing to that bottom line, whether it's good or bad, right? If it's negative, it is what it is. But if you don't know, you're never going to make the changes.
Right. You need to fix it. How many people do we know that have one unit, great margins, making money, they open that second unit, complete disaster?
Yeah.
Because they never trained anyone to oversee that first unit.
Yeah.
And they just went to that second unit and tried to run both, but wasn't really able to. They didn't put the proper steps in line, which is being the accountability part up top.
Yeah.
Right. And then the financial part is it didn't work because no one came in your restaurant because it wasn't ranked correctly.
Right.
So I think they all go together. They all work it out together. It's all about keeping an eye on the ball.
Yes, exactly. All right, well, thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you on next week's episode.